Hello, this is Hillary and Clinton, and welcome to Blacklantic, a podcast and media channel bringing East Coast voices to the world.
This week, we'll be interviewing Junior Moaku of the SaveMeSaveWe.com clothing line.
Our podcast is weekly with guests and topics, and you can find us online by searching Blacklantic on most social media platforms, as well as on our website, blacklantic.ca. Clinton, how was your weekend?
My weekend was pretty good. I saw some cousins from Prince Edward Island. They were in town for some baseball games, and my cousin's team obviously took the gold. They won the whole tournament, so that was good. And I also had a chance to stop by the Mosaic Festival, which is Moncton's multicultural festival. Now, in past years, a lot of people have criticized the festival for being, not as much of a multicultural festival, but more of like an Acadian festival, especially because the Acadians have a different festival later on in August. However, this year I saw the most representation and diversity that I'd ever seen in a festival. There must have been about 30 or 40 different cultures represented, lots of live presentations and performances from different cultural groups and countries. And at the end, I got to be honest, Maestro Fresh West, a lot of y'all might not know him if you're younger, but Maestro Fresh West did his performance at 9 p.m. and it was a pretty live show. It was pretty packed. It was good. I missed Aquaculture, an artist from Nova Scotia who's a very talented musician, and I really regret that, but I couldn't get there on time. But so this Mosaic Festival, while there's pros and cons to every festival and some behind the scenes stuff, it was a good representation. Not only was it well represented, I noticed the people walking around. It was the most diversity I'd ever seen in the festival goers this year, just showing the continued diversity and how Moncton is actually getting quite more multicultural.
I saw a reel from downtown Moncton, and I did not realize there were that many countries that or people that lived in Moncton now, and I was thoroughly impressed. Also, I mentioned to you Aquaculture because I want to get them on the podcast, so that's sick.
Yeah, they're really talented.
Yeah, they're really great.
I know you heard of them, Junior, right?
No, I don't. No, I haven't.
I'm
gonna have to look
Halifax.
into them.
You got to check them out.
Yeah, I think that from my understanding, talking to someone else from another Canadian band, they're like Africville based, from my understanding, or like it's a gentleman from Africville, but now they're probably out of Halifax, but Nova Scotian black band.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yes.
Hillary, how was your weekend? And then let's get to the man of the hour.
Junior. I will very quickly. Mine was good. Very quickly, the big thing that's coming up for Toronto is Caravana Carnival, and so I went to Why are you making that face?
That horrible accent attempt. Okay.
It was not an attempt. I was just trying to say it in a fun way.
Caravana.
I was just trying to say it in a fun way. I'm not going to try. But no, we went to Black Owned TO, which is a company here that is a specifically Black store with all of these little vendors. They did a market at Stockton, so I got to go look at all of the fun clothes and food, and it was sort of like a pre-gaming for the big weekend next weekend. So that was my big thing. And then there was a DJ thing at Woodbine Park and Beach near my house, so I did that. Walked 35,000 steps. That was my weekend.
That's amazing. Yeah, tell us about Junior.
Yes, so the intro that I have, which I found on the Save Me Save We website, but I will preface this by saying that we spoke to Tyshawn Carter Newman, we had on the show, who told us about you. And so we're really thrilled to have you on because we did have a little bit of inside knowledge. But Save Me, Save We is a clothing brand whose focus is to increase the conversation around mental health through the power of fashion. Their eye-catching designs, inspirational slogans, and motivational quotes welcome positive conversations. Save Me, Save We also focuses on increasing the mental health education literacy of youth, young adults, and parents by empowering them with training and resources necessary to improve or maintain their emotional wellness. They offer several workshops as well. And Julian, as we will get into, you're not only running all of this, but model, actor, alumni from Acadia, got a ton of things going on. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Busy. It's been intense last 8 months, and but it's been a good summer so far, so I'm excited.
That's good. We're so excited to have you on. Before we get into your exciting 8 months, we wanted to start out with a bit about who you are. If you were born and raised from Halifax, maybe your parents, if they immigrated to Halifax, how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, so I was born in Montreal. So I grew up there until I was 7. So I speak French fluently. That's the first language. My parents immigrated from Belgium. Before immigrating there, they were from the Congo. So I'm Congolese by blood. And so I grew up in Hamilton and just played basketball and eventually went to school in Chicago, then Iowa, and then Cape Breton, eventually Wolfville. So I people like to say I'm well traveled and seen many places, but I think all those experiences led me to creating the company really. So it's all necessary in somewhere.
How did living in these different places lead you to create a company with such a positive message and focus on mental health?
I think I had the um I was fortunate to see different side of the world, even though it could Midwest, let's say Chicago and Midwest Iowa, they're both within the same region, but they're two different type of cultures. And so growing up in Hamilton, which was a different world, growing up in Montreal, which was a different world, and then going to East Coast of Nova Scotia, they're all different places. And I think um, having so many experiences of moving, meeting new people, and seeing different types of lifestyles, seeing different types of people, really grew my social interactions and my emotional intelligence to a point where I became very aware of people, emotions, and just culture all around. So the way that helped this company specifically is I got to move to Chicago when I was 17 and super young, and I was playing basketball on a scholarship that, I was playing basketball in a sport that I only started taking seriously 2 years prior. I wanted to be a pro skateboarder. I wanted to travel the world, be a Ryan Sheckler, hang out with Nigel Houston and all those guys. And but when I decided to focus on basketball, I knew that my skills weren't at the highest level. I knew that my work ethic would get me where I wanted to, which was just play college basketball, maybe possibly play pro. And doing so, I realized, okay, I went to school in Chicago, and I was like, man, I'm playing in front of guys who are more skilled, but not as mentally sharp or as mentally focused as I was. And that's when I was introduced to, okay, mental health plays a big part in the classroom, plays a big part in our social life, plays a big part in sports. And so seeing that, then going to Iowa and seeing how magnified sports are and how people react to wins and loss and the pressure of social interactions, really put a spotlight for that on me, if that made sense. Because, sorry, it's been a
All
long
good.
day.
All good. All good.
But when you stay in your own circle your whole life, you actually don't see the differences. And so the people who live and grew up in Iowa don't know anything outside of Iowa. And being from Montreal, Hamilton, coming from Chicago, Nova Scotia, and all those places, I realized that there was a very big common denominator in people's happiness and people's social life, and it was the lack of attention on their mental health.
Wow. I find that super fascinating, and I want to ask two questions and I hope that they're okay to ask. Tell me
Sure.
if you don't want to answer them, that's fine. But I'm curious if like what your mental health was sort of like traveling that much, and if it's that like introspection that helped put a spotlight on the mental health in the general vicinity of all of those different cities. Because for me, as someone who's only really lived Canada, Moncton, Toronto, Ottawa, I can pinpoint the differences in like how I've been treated racially, which is the other question I want to ask you. But like to me, Canada, I see like a sort of blanket mental health across the board. There's like the elite rich and there's sort of everybody else. Whereas, you know, two different countries with much different, surprisingly to some people, like laws and rules and ways of living, despite being neighbors. I'm wondering, like, did you find in yourself by traveling so much that your mental health was in a state that you started looking at resources and the people around you and noticing differences, and then also the similarities in all those countries? Or what for you, like what were those differences?
Looking back, my mental health was never really crucially impacted.
Mhm.
And I didn't like pinpoint it to mental health until later on. I was just like, what is this thing that people are battling and not realizing? Like you understand it, but you're not speaking it. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
I could just feel it. And so when I went to school in Iowa, I think I had 9 classes in one semester. I had and we had to wake up for team breakfast. I was doing an expedited like accounting program, and so it was like team breakfast at 7:30, and then you had class, and then I had practice. Then right after that, I usually had piano, and then I had probably like 2 science classes in the afternoon, in the evening, and then I was at the library, and those were my days. And from Monday to Thursday, and then Thursday night, me and my friends would get loose. So that it was kind of like it was very restricted and it was higher pressure. And within those times, I was like, oh man, I'm burning out, and I could tell like um what is this thing. So my coping mechanism was those Thursday nights. It was those outlets. It was looking forward to the weekend. We used to say win or lose, we lose. And looking back, I didn't understand at the time, but it was later on when you're like, okay, well, what is destructive, and why are we not coming out of this more empowered? And so though my mental health in college was never a detriment, because I kind of was always I always ask my questions, and I'll speak to it about it a little bit later. um I I was always more on top of it, if that makes sense. I didn't know how to put words to it, but I was always like, oh, why am I feeling like this? Maybe going to hang out with some friends or go for a drive will be nice. And then that would be my self-care, but I didn't have the words to put it at the time.
Yeah, the way you're
That makes
explaining that
sense.
makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, like self-care and coping mechanisms, and people who have coping mechanisms in place are usually better able to deal with mental health issues, stress, or even trauma. I think that's what you're trying to say. Like you thankfully had these tools to lay back on, whereas people around you saw didn't. Would you say that's like a yes, or
Um,
am I way off?
yeah, well, no, you're pretty much right. It's so right now I'm a lot more articulated than I was then, right?
Sure.
But I'm trying to use words or feelings that I felt in that present in that time, right? And so I'm kind of like, our friends wouldn't talk if we were stressed or anxious. Like we lose about 6 to 7 guys a year on basketball teams because of stress or depression or anxiety. But those words are not really being expressed, and so we're just like, this person is feeling unwell or something like that. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
we didn't have words to put it together. So me, when I was there, uh, I say this in some of my presentations. I almost lost a family member due to death by suicide when I was younger. So the idea of feeling emotionally unwell to the point where you wouldn't want to take your life was already in my mind. And so every time where I never felt like myself, I would be like, what will revitalize me in this moment, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
And I mean, so that situation, I was just asking because, like, so that situation actually, the almost suicide opened your eyes to the fact that people can get so upset or have so many internal issues that they would take their own life. For me, I was like, I've one, Hilly, you didn't get to ask your question about racism. I'm sorry, but I
We
have
can go back to it after. Yeah,
one
go
more.
on.
I mean, is one thing you noticed growing where I grew up in Toronto, like concepts like mental health and depression and therapy and psychology. Those are words I never heard growing up. It wasn't even a thing. In the different places you grew up, were those, did you notice those similarities in different cities that people in certain communities just didn't talk about those kinds of things?
No, we don't talk about it. Even like by almost losing a family member to it, it was never talked about. Um,
Yeah.
After the situation was resolved, it was probably never mentioned again. And so it leaves you with like, what what happened? You have questions, but it's kind of taboo. And if you're
Yeah.
Christian or you're Black, it's a very stigmatized thing. And so it's definitely
I was both.
so
Yeah,
you know exactly
yeah,
what I'm saying. It's
yeah.
definitely not talked about. And so um it's the fact that you're exposed that your mind kind of wonders like, this is a possibility. And I feel like some people never had the chance to just talk about it or even know that depression could lead to this. And honestly, like the progress we've made with mental health and discussions in sports and athletes 7 years ago or 8 years ago has drastically changed. But when I tell you that that word never came up in my 3 years in America, it never did.
Yep.
That's crazy. That's really sad, and also, but like a stark difference too, I guess now, because I mean, I can like completely agree with everything Clinton's saying, and maybe something you've noticed about the East Coast as well, is that I felt like growing up that there was no mention of that type of stuff as well. For me, it was moving to Ontario that I all of a sudden noticed all of these resources and this big push for mental health here. But besides the point, yeah, the question that I wanted to ask you very briefly, and just because we're a Black centric podcast, and I feel I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, and is about, you know, ever feeling out of place because you are a Black man in all of these different locations, and you named so many. And I often people think that like Montreal, Toronto, the bigger cities are going to be more inclusive, and that places like Cape Breton aren't. And then I've spent time in Halifax, and I've heard that Halifax isn't. And so I'm just curious overall, are there any of those places that like any experience that you had stuck out to you as negative towards your race or your personhood, or maybe the opposite is something really positive, or you were surprised? And did you think Cape Breton was as white as I currently think that it is? Because I still haven't been to Cape Breton, and I'm like, it's white, right?
Yeah. Yeah, first off, it was, I'll answer the Cape Breton question in a second, but moving so much have put me in so many different types of scenarios where I was kind of discriminated in some way or form. Coming from Montreal to Hamilton, I was French and I had a Quebecois accent. And so growing up, I felt what it felt like to be alienated because of feeling a little different. And then going to Chicago was all Black. Like it was the first time in my life where I was just surrounded by a Black community, and it felt super welcoming. So when I went to Iowa, it was a complete shock, right? It was predominantly white, and if you look for the bad in people, you will see it. And so when I was there, I did not focus. I did not focus on racism. I did not look for the bad. I stayed within my corner. And so I honestly can say I didn't really experience it. Though I know it was happening, I did not experience it as much. And then when I went to Cape Breton, there are Black communities there, and there is some racism happening and discrimination. But again, I did not put my focus or put out the energy that I want to reciprocate any of that stuff, if that makes sense. My high school yearbook quote was "Stay low, keep your feet moving," which is a quote from Friday Night Lights, and that's kind of how I was planning to go to university. It was like, focus on what you got to do and keep moving, and that stuff had never really bothered me or affected me much. I never really saw it.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for letting me know about Cape Breton.
No, honestly, did you say you've been to Cape Breton?
No, I haven't. In Nova Scotia, I think I've only gone to Halifax. I don't think I've gone anywhere else really in Nova Scotia.
There's a massive Black community in Cape Breton, and so it's not as bad as people think, but it's definitely the country.
All right, well, next summer I'll make an effort.
Yeah, it's beautiful too. Oh my God.
We often hear one of the other when we're interviewing guests on the show. Like either people are very tuned into and focused on the racism and the fight and the struggle to break it down, because whether or not we pay attention to it, it's there. And even if it's not blatantly in your face, it's systemically there. And then the other group of people we interview typically say what you said, which is a perfectly reasonable and sound way to live as well. Like I'm here, I gotta survive, I gotta hustle, I gotta focus on what I gotta focus on. I know there's this stuff around me, but I've got my eyes on the prize, and I want positive things to come into my life. So yeah, what you pay attention to, what you look for, you will find. So yeah, I just want to point out that we see that, like, you know, it's around you, but you kind of keep your head low and just keep moving forward to the end.
For sure. It's like, for example, in Iowa, I have friends who their families, like, I could never date outside. I could never date biracial, let's say, right? but their parents, I'm best friends with their parents. I'm playing piano with them at church, and they're like my accounting tutors, and it's a very tight knit community, and it's kind of like, but some people like, if I gave them something to look bad upon my culture or me as a Black man, then they probably would have attacked that. You know what I mean? And so whenever I was in a situation where I'm like the minority, I just always say my authentic self. I didn't have to please anybody, but I always was respectful, and I felt like that was always reciprocated to me. And so I kind of lucked out with that. But it is also in a way, and I'm saying this because it's kind of like racism has a way to manifest its way in weird ways. You know what I mean? And it's like, yes, I accept you, but you don't belong type of thing. And so I saw that a lot.
Or as long as you don't act like as long as you don't do anything that fits the negative stereotype I have of other Black people, because maybe you're just not like them.
Yeah.
So you're accepted, but we have to code switch a bit, and you don't want to give them any reason to reinforce any stereotypes they might have. And I'm not calling everyone down there racist, or I'm not calling white people racist at all. But like you said, there are some of those out there. Anyways, that was very insightful. Did you talk much about living in Halifax? What was living in Halifax like for you? Since again, we're East Coast here.
Honestly, like ironically, the place where I felt physically the most racism in all my traveling was probably in Halifax. Like, which I think is pretty funny because I've been in places where you wouldn't see diversity in 30-mile radius, but it's
Nova Scotia's got a big history though.
Yeah, and it's weird, but Halifax has been great, honestly. Like, other than the little slip ups every now and then, I've really enjoyed living in Halifax. I was fortunate to be employed right out of university, and I still had my clothing brand going. And so coming here and finding a community that was supportive, a community that was helped me grow my network and all that. Halifax has been great.
So I'm curious because you mentioned doing like obviously the sports scholarship, college, but then alumni of Acadia. So at what point did you switch? And then what you just said is that you had started the brand. So you started the brand while you were studying. And then how does the accounting come into play in all of those lanes?
Honestly, I don't even know. I just, yeah, like I wanted to go to school and do something that was worthwhile, and I was always told by my high school math teacher accounting was it. And so when I had the opportunity to do it, I was like, I'll do accounting. I wanted to do economics, but they didn't offer it as a major. And then when I went to Acadia, I already had my accounting AA, which is good enough to be a bookkeeper, an account assistant, or an accountant if you get your CPA. But I wanted to continue my studies, and so I wanted to maybe get an MBA. So I went to K-Brand. Basketball there wasn't as great, and then I went to Acadia just to get my BBA. But it was at Acadia that I decided to grow the company. Like at the end of my 4th year of university, I did 5 years.
Okay. Do you want to tell us like what sparked the idea? Because you mentioned that like obviously it was all this mental health like insight that you had and learning the language and your own family experiences, but what was it that made you one day go, I'm going to take this thing that I care about and turn it into not only just activism, but also activism through a brand and clothing? Or did it start out with wanting to sell clothes and then the activism piece came in after the fact?
It was probably both at the same time. And like I said, like I've been all over the place and did like the skateboarding, like acting, all that. And so mental health, I never was never like, oh, this is gonna be my passion, I'm gonna become an expert on mental health. It felt like it was so in my face. I needed to talk about it. And then it was impacting the people that I cared about the most, which were my friends and family, and nobody was really talking about it. But the triggering point was so now I've played basketball in 4 different cities in 6 different years, and I've got to see a different type of people. And I could see a reoccurring theme, and it's just like sports teams are losing 4 to 5 guys a year due to mental health reasons. And by that point, I understand what mental health is. And I'm in hotel rooms traveling with guys, and I'm like, why are you sad? Why are you depressed? And they're giving hints, but they're not trying to talk about it. It's still stigmatized. And I'm trying to welcome that conversation without pushing too much or crossing boundaries. And so that's when I first
You're
my
muted.
teammates are really being hurt. And
oh, you froze for a second. If you want to just go back like one sentence.
yeah. And so it was really like what I was saying, it's really impacting like my teammates, and I could really see it, but I didn't really want to probe too much because it would create pushbacks. And so that's when I first noticed, and it became really apparent. And so when I noticed that, I could just see all the red flags everywhere. And one day I was at the library, and I could overhear a group of students talking and saying, I can't wait to get this exam done so I can get blackout drunk. And it's really in that moment where I realized that our coping mechanisms were drugs, that our coping mechanisms are alcohol, that our coping mechanisms is everything destructive rather than empowering. And I also realized in that moment that feeling I've been feeling since Chicago, which is people's pain and suffering cannot bring you happiness. It actually takes away from that. And that moment, it really became apparent. Like, I give this example, like, have you ever told a joke to somebody and you guys are laughing and somebody walks in the room mad as hell, and all of a sudden their energy makes the joke all of a sudden not fun anymore, right? We're products of our environment, and people's actions, energy, words, their thoughts and decisions impact you directly or indirectly. And that really became apparent for me in that moment. I was like, that's what it is. That's why sometimes I'm feeling happier than other people in situations where we should all be feeling happy, but their pain and energy is taken away from that. And so that moment in that library, realizing that, man, those people they're about to finish this exam on Thursday and go get messed up, is their way to celebrate all their hard work to me was alarming. And so right away I messaged my brother, and I was like, man, I wanted people to talk to me about mental health without doing the most. And so that's why I had the idea of having a shirt that said "Save Me" on it. And so people would genuinely ask me, hey, what's going on? And I give me the opportunity to talk about mental health. And so that's how the idea of Save Me came about.
Wow. And in the beginning, is that the result you got? Did you find that your goal was working? People were coming up to you and speaking to you, and how did the brand grow from there?
Yeah, so I think I got the idea in April, and I kind of was telling a couple people, like my couple close friends, like, I'm going to wear a shirt that says this, but it was still very stigmatized, and I was very afraid. So I didn't really think it was going to work as well as it did. But then that June, I lost a friend that I had met in Iowa through death by suicide. And that's when I was like, all right, no, this is, whether I like it or not, I'm going to pursue with all my might, at least my final year of basketball. My focus is going to be talking about mental health because it's bad, and I'm losing people that I care about. And so, yeah, September 15th, I believe, I started going to class with a shirt that said "Save Me" on it. My teacher, I walk in class, teachers would be like, everybody sit down, Junior needs saving. And and so my teachers would be like, Junior, what's going on? Like, talk to me. And then it was a chance for me to talk about my mental health in front of the class, right? And then they would be like, see my vulnerability and talk about their own mental health, and seeing people of their pedigree of people like we look up to talk about their own mental health and their own struggles was very effective. And it showed me in the moment that mental health was not just for the students, because I remember I don't know nothing. I'm just here pushing a message that I know is not talked about, right? I was like, oh wow, it's not just us students, it's also adults. And that taught me a lot. And within that month of wearing the shirt, I don't wear them anymore as much because it was so gravitating. People would be like, what's going on? Everything okay? And so it worked very effectively. And within that month, I realized one thing. I stopped saying fight the stigma, because a fight is a physical and verbal conflict between two or more party. And when I talked about mental health, nobody was fighting me or arguing what I was saying was wrong. I realized people were just not educated on it. And so the stigma was creating by the lack of education. And so that's why I was like, man, we're not just going to be a clothing brand, we're going to be a company that focuses on mental health literacy and educate. And so by October, I shut it down. I was like, man, I got to educate myself, because people were coming to my house at 2 a.m. People were calling me. People were texting me, asking to see me after class, or like it just I became a place where people were like, hey, I can talk to you about mental health, which was the goal. It was, how do we start this conversation?
That's crazy. Very cool to be so successful, but I understand the like overwhelm. On a very like personal but like related note, I've been very vocal about a lot of my mental health stuff, about being sober, about sexual assault, about all of these things, and my DMs often have become people's safe spaces, to the point where I've had to be like, you need to just send a trigger warning if at 8 a.m. you're going to be like, hey, I need help because this person's going to be at an event and they assaulted me and I don't know how to proceed, because I can't just wake up to these things. And I can completely understand that, like, you want people to get educated, you want people to have safe spaces, you want people to be able to talk about it and know that they've got someone in their corner, but you have to have boundaries to protect your own mental being so that you don't burn out or also get triggered and traumatized in the process. And you're trying to like, you're just trying to have conversations with people. Like, the bombardment, I can imagine, must have been crazy. And so, yeah, the reason we've heard about you is because of these talks and these workshops that you've given and how it's grown in that way. So after shutting it down in October and working on the like literacy portion of it all, from what I gather from the website, I think you offer like 7 or 8 different types of workshops. So if you want to tell us a bit about like what some of those entail, what the reception has been, what the like how big has this gotten for you?
Honestly, like, I'm gonna say, from what it was and what it started, everything to me is massive. It's colossal, because all I wanted to do was help a couple teammates, and the fact that some people wear the shirt and send me messages saying, seeing my involvement within this movement really support them. It's been big, and the fact that people are now asking for me to become a speaker, a keynote, or do workshop, to me is just, it's something that was kind of unfathomable at the time, because you never think it leads to that. You know what I mean? And so the way workshops are really created is whether I learn new content and I'm like, oh, this idea will work well, or some organizations are like, hey, we want to do a workshop for youth. And so I create a whole workshop that focuses on 3 things I believe is super important for youth. And so our main workshops right now is called Thrive in Peace, Not in Pieces, which is a workshop I developed mainly for college students and focusing on how to set goals. And actually, Thrive in Peace, Not in Pieces focuses on goals and accomplishment, but really highlights how we neglect our wellness or wellness routines and what self-care really is. And so Thrive in Peace, Not in Pieces is one of our best ones. And then we got mental health over mental games, which helps people become better allies for men and how to support them in their mental health journey. And we got a couple others.
So for anybody who's just listening, also, if you want to switch to YouTube, click and listen on both platforms. We're looking right now at savemesafely.com and looking at the various workshops that are listed on the website. I think that's incredible. And I did want to highlight, like, obviously I can't understand it all because I'm a woman, but it sounds like a lot of what you're talking about in like the sports and the locker rooms and the hotel, and a lot of the stigma is not just the stigma of speaking out about mental health, but it's also the toxic masculinity of men aren't supposed to feel, they're not supposed to have emotions or cry or be vulnerable. They're always supposed to just be tough and run for the goal, play the sports, be the manly man, and not actually feel. And you're out here trying to break down that barrier and make that change. And I think that's like extremely important, because we we all live in a safer community when everybody can be vulnerable, not just people who present as women.
For sure. There's a lot of pressure too. It's kind of like at the time I was very scared because um let's say you decide to talk about mental health, right? And you're underperforming as an athlete, then people will associate your performance with the fact that you are comfortable talking about mental health and you're emotional, and that impacts the way you play. So I felt the pressure of being a good athlete and representing, being a voice for the voiceless at the time. And it was very, and I think that to me, that was the most challenging part in the locker room. But again, even while I'm doing this, right, it wasn't talked in the locker rooms as a group, but individuals would come and talk to me. You know what I mean? And so I feel like that toxic masculinity in locker rooms and in sports got to be addressed from top down. Once you see your leader talk about it, then the other people will follow.
Yeah, you mentioned certain groups earlier, like Black communities and Christian communities, and of course the athletic world. But yeah, there's also, I was going to mention that too. There's the male aspect of it. The men aren't conditioned to speak about how they feel. It's more about thinking and acting and not actually having feelings and emotions. So even that can be viewed as a sign of weakness among men traditionally, which is slowly starting to change over the past 10 years. What year did this all start?
This started I had the idea in 2018, but it's really started like what the company looks like today, more so in late 2019.
Okay. We see on your website there's podcasts, there's YouTube video series. So these are all ways to reach different people in different ways on top of the workshops, right?
Yeah, which honestly, like I had like, so Outlaw was a web series that I created right before the pandemic, and it talked about we would talk to individuals who went through their emotional, like their mental health struggles, and it talks about the resiliency over how they overcame and all that. And so there's about 5 episodes I never felt comfortable releasing at the time, and now I'm finally comfortable releasing that. And then I did Home But Not Alone as well. There's a couple episodes that are going to come out with different individuals from different professions who talk about their mental health and how they're thriving throughout the pandemic. But what I think we're going to do is just put all of those together and just make it the big Out Loud, which is hearing people's darkest and deepest fears and overcomings out loud. Which started with Riley. Oh man, it's a brave soul to share his story, which is awesome, which is what we needed, right? Which is the reality of a college student who went through depression and suicidal ideation and suicidal attempts, and now talking about his overcoming, how he lives life. And it's an amazing episode. And the next one's where we have one with a mother who I met her in a class in a class I took on suicide and prevention at Acadia, which was a master class, which I had to write a letter and say, hey, can I please let into this class, because I'm trying to talk about mental health and I need all the resources I need. And the university had to go on a vote for it, and it was 5-4, and I got let into that master's class. And she was introducing herself and talking about mental health, and she said, there's nothing worse than coming home. There's nothing worse than going home and possibly finding your daughter dead. She said it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And when I heard those words, I was like shook to the core, and I knew that I would create a podcast based on those sentences. And I have an episode. I was lucky enough to get an episode with her, which I'll release later this summer.
Wow. So for people listening and not watching on YouTube, it's savemesavewe.com, where there's all kinds of amazing content here. And those stories sound really moving. People should definitely, like, when you're done with this, move over to there and check out that content as well, which is something I'm going to do after the show. Here, you take it, Hillary.
For sure. Sorry, I'm regrouping because I've been in that scenario and my eyes started to water. So I'm just gonna Have a deep have a deep breath with all of our listeners about that. It's very heavy, but it's extremely important for people to listen to that. And it also, like, I do think that a lot of people, the way that we speak about trauma and mental health now, that more and more people should be trauma informed, because it does seem that a lot of the people in power are not trauma informed, and it does tend to fall to regular civilians much more than it should. And it would be great if we all could just take a class to figure out the best way to respond to people in distress. But anyway, I just needed to ramble that while my eyes dried up, and now we're good. Now we're good. So like, obviously you've been doing the workshops, so you've also been, from my understanding, like going into schools, speaking with people, and you had Tyshawn, as we mentioned, be one of the guest speakers as well.
Shout out to Tyshawn, for real.
Yeah, Tyshawn, I mean, I know that he wants to, from my understanding, like do something like that out here as well, and like is really trying to push mental health. He does like those mental health Mondays, and it seems like a really, like, a lot of great, you know, Black male people working towards breaking down these barriers. What do you envision Save Me, Save We, or any of these, you know, speaker series and the podcasts and the video series growing into? What are your future goals?
Would it be crazy if I said I want Save Me Save We to be the Nike of mental health?
That's not crazy.
Yeah, that's cool. You got a dream. You got to dream big. Just do it.
You know what? It's not crazy enough, is what Nike would say.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
no. So, and when I first met Tyshawn, one of the things we were talking on FaceTime is, this needs to be fun. This, like, he doesn't want to do a presentation and it's like sad and people are moping around. He said, like, no, this needs to be fun. And I think somewhere along the line, we get confused with what mental health is. And so I think I want Save Me, Save We to be synonymous with mental health and not mental illness, if that makes sense. I want people to see Save Me, Save We as a resource and a place where they can come and get and increase their mental health literacy, have the resources, get the consulting for their organization. And I say that I want Save Me, Save We to be the Nike, because Nike makes clothes for, let's say, for people who to get in shape. You know what I mean? So, but when you see Nike, you see the result. You don't think about being out of shape, if that makes sense. And so when I want to see people wear Save Me, Save We, I want people to see it like people thriving, and the idea of thriving rather than the idea of mental illness. And I think once we're able to push the message of, hey, this is mental health, and if you're proactive and instead of reactive, then things can be a lot better. And so that's why I really want to push the agenda of, hey, proactive self-care, proactive wellness routines to everybody.
Less like mental health and more like mentally healthy. Like, this is what a good mentally sound person like looks like and feels like and can be, so that they're an example of like the goal. And I really like that idea.
Yeah, and I think, like, and I say, like, mentally healthy, like, everybody has like their mental health, you know what I mean? It is on a spectrum, it's on a continuum. And so it's just instead of always, when every time people think about mental health, it has that connotation that it has to be bad, right? Or it's bad or it's sad. But on the continuum, you're either mentally healthy or mentally ill, and most people are in between and closer to the health. But I want the idea of, like, hey, when we talk about mental health, it's not stigmatized. We see it as the gym shark or the athletic. Like, we see the athletic part, not the out of shape part, if that makes sense.
It's a cool concept. It's a cool, like, yeah. So Nike inspires athleticism. You want people, I think what you're saying is you want people to see your brand and be inspired to work towards improving their mental health situation, wherever it is on that spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want
it's
it
like
to be
a motivator.
Yeah.
Something bad, but of something good to achieve, to thrive towards.
Exactly. Yeah.
Constantly working on every day, like health. You don't just get healthy once and then you're done for the rest of your life. Like you have to
Yeah.
maintain it and work on it and continue it.
Put the time and
day in, day out.
effort towards it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that makes perfect sense, and that's a great way to think about it. Did you? So you also, so you don't just do this. You model and you act, and you're in this company. And I'm not sure how many people are a part of this company. Maybe you want to tell us how big the team is, if you feel comfortable. If not, don't worry about it. Did you do those things before or after this? When did those become passions of yours?
Acting's been like a passion of mine since I'm like 6. I used to do improv in Montreal is a big thing. So you have like improv teams, and you go to travel against other schools, and you compete. It's like one improv team against the other. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. So
okay, go on,
in Montreal, so what we would do. So in Montreal, I would do that when I was like 6, 7. And then when I moved to Hamilton, I was fortunate enough to have a elementary school that had an improv team that would compete at other schools. And so the crowd votes who had the best little skit. And so it's like this very competitive aspect. And I would get like regional all-star MVP, and I had set myself as a top improv player. And so acting had always felt fun and natural to me. And so when I went to school in Iowa, there was this joke that I was an underwear model from Canada because I was lean and shredded. And so when people started believing I was an actual model, I was like, maybe I should give it a shot. Post some couple pictures online, message a couple agents, got back to me. I had the chance to choose who I wanted at the time and started working with them. And then they were like, hey, you know what? The day I got signed, they were like, you got an audition 30 minutes from now, go. And I was like, oof. And so I was kind of thrown into the acting part. It was the first time I had done actual acting rather than improv. And I just enjoyed it and fell in love with it. So I kept doing it.
Are you in anything that anybody can like go and watch?
Yeah. So I was in Digstown last year, which season 3, I think. And then I did and then I'm a main character, a principal character in a show called These Woods Are Haunted, and Broken Famous. Just a couple. There's an IMDb page, so whatever you would see on there, yeah, you'll be able to watch.
No offense to anyone before, but our guests keep getting more and more prolific. The winner of Big Brother, some with an IMDb page. Like we're getting very cool guests. I'm very happy. But that's thrilling. That's so exciting. And also it's amazing to get signed and 30 minutes later someone is already interested in you. I don't know how often that happens. So that really must say something about how you came off and your talent, but also you're already well spoken because you do speaking engagement. So a lot of that, like it does all sort of, the puzzle pieces do make sense. Clinton, are you pulling up the IMDb page? Because yes, you are.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Am I on mute? Okay.
No.
Okay. So walk us through here. So tell us what to click on, and tell us a little bit about. This is really cool. Tell us a little bit what you did.
So
more.
So scariest night of my life was I did that was actually in 2020, I believe, or 2019, and I'm the main character. So it's like a scary episode, like it's like a reenactment episode. And so my character meets a girl and later on finds out that she's a werewolf. And so it was like this whole episode. I don't know how to explain it, but it was a whole 3 days of honestly, what I'm gonna say out of this episode is I showed up on set about 30 minutes late, and I show up and there's already 3 guys there that were supposed to be my best friend, like in the show, and they were so close. I was like, man, you guys know each other your whole life? They're like, no, we met each other 20 minutes ago. I'm like, what? And so the next 3 days, all of us were so tight, and the producers and cast was like, we've never seen anybody come so close together so quickly. And so I left that show with like lifetime friends that I still hang out with till this day. But that was one of my favorite episodes. Definitely one of my favorite shows to shoot. And then for Digstown, I played the role of Reed, which was super quick. It was about like a couple minutes on screen, and I get heated with this lady who ends up killing me. But so the interaction is about a couple of minutes, and I just get under her skin, and I'm her niece's boyfriend, and so I get right up in her face. I mean mug her, talk, all that good stuff, and then she just cracks me and kills me later on. So that was a fun episode to shoot as well.
Is it hard to die on screen?
Thankfully they.
Yeah,
Yeah, when they were like, "Can you make a noise if you dying?" I was like, what does that sound like?" So it was kind of weird, but thankfully, like they because it is CBC, they don't show the whole action. If it was Stars or something ran by 50 Cent, like I would have had to do a lot more. But no, it was like the beginning and the ending seemed to be dead on the ground. So that was really fun to shoot as well.
I've heard of Digstown, but I've never watched it. So I'm gonna message you after, or you could do you know what season episode that was? I'm gonna watch that on the gem.
Yeah, it's season 3, episode 3. Click on Jojo Kirby first.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Yeah, I'm not great with IMDb.
That's the name.
You got to get your profile
episode.
picture. Where's your profile picture? Where's the?
So here's what's going on. So everybody who has an IMDb page, like everybody here, their agent or themselves pay for it, and they create their own account.
Okay.
And I was not seeing any benefits of still paying for my IMDb account.
I hear that.
Which I stopped honestly like a month ago. Because I decided not to act as much this entire summer. Because man, you get paid well, but your taxes are crazy. So I was like,
yes.
You know what? I need my account to teach me a little more on this. So, but no, so my IMDb page is gonna stay down until I do another show, and then I'm gonna bring it back up.
Gotcha.
When the show airs and type of thing.
Okay, season 3, episode 2. Cool.
Wow. Well, I know Digstown. I know that. Well, I don't know. I'm not going to say who it is that you and I, Clinton, both know, but we know someone who's going to be on the next season now that they're filming in PEI and not in Nova Scotia. And we're supposed to have someone who's, I think, always on the show, like a recurring character as a guest. So we need to watch the show for several people and several different reasons.
Are you allowed to name drop who you know is going to be?
Who I know who's going to be, I don't think that we should, but we know we know Mfo, who's friends with Logic of Stolen from Africa, who we want to get on the show, who Logic of Stolen from Africa said he would get us on. And I know he's a recurring character on. But the PEI person, I'll tell you after for sure. I just don't want to say anything. And then for some reason that person is like, CBC kicks them off. Because obviously CBC listens to every podcast that we do.
Everyone.
Every single one. Anyway.
I forgot to say it's not there, but have you guys watched the show Moonshine?
I've not.
No, it's now on Netflix. But I was casted to do a small role for them last year, and if you guys are looking for Nova Scotia shows to watch, Moonshine's the one to go with. It's also a great show.
I've heard about it
with some local guys. Great
That's
show.
Amazing.
Huh? I'm looking for it. But that's cool. I mean, and to our listeners listening to the audio, that's great. But more and more, we're getting better with this video stuff. So you're gonna have to start converting over to our YouTube channel so we can grow that too.
Yeah, do that, and also go watch all of the stuff that we've now referenced too. Watch our podcast. Watch all of the IMDb list.
Just look up Junior Moaku and find it all.
Yeah, find all of it. That's insane. So you've decided to act less this summer to focus more on the brand or enjoying your summer?
Yeah, well, full disclosure, I had a crazy surgery in March, which kind of sidelined me for a couple weeks. And so I was like, I just decided not to act as much this summer. Plus my hair is a little different than the pictures that were on the IMDb page. So I'm getting them re-dreaded. I'm going to get myself a new photo shoot. So when the IMDb page is back up, it's going to be popping.
All right.
That's fair. That's exciting though.
I feel like we could probably talk to you for another hour or two, but we're way past 7 and I don't know what your timeline is for the night. But is there anything else you want the listeners to know? Any thoughts you have, final messages about what you're doing that you want to leave, impressions you want to leave with the people?
Like the only message I want to say is, like myself and everybody that I do know, like you do not have to be a mental health expert or have all the resource to talk about mental health. It's going to be something I talk about for the rest of my life with my peers and strangers. And I just want to encourage everybody to, if you feel sad for more than 1 or 2 days, or you see somebody you know care about act out of character for 1 or 2 days, very important to reach out. Do not be afraid. Nobody is offended by getting asked if they're okay. And getting comfortable by getting uncomfortable talking about mental health is the only way we can improve the overall health of this world. And so I just want to, everybody who did listen, if you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. But most importantly, prioritize your personal mental health and checking on friends.
Strong message. That's a strong ending.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So for us, thank you for tuning in once again as well. Find us on all your social sites and streaming channels. And you took the words out of my mouth, Junior. I always give thanks to anyone who's listening through to the end.
Yep.
So big shout out, respect for that. We're celebrating like, I mean, not millions, but 1,500 listens this week. So that's pretty good. And yeah, it's growing. So yeah.
We're doing pretty good. So yeah, SaveMeSaveWe.com, Clinton Davis, Cropberry, Justin Moaku. That was an episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're good?
Peace.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.
See ya.